The Grand Canal of China stretches over 1,000 miles through the heart of the nation, connecting Beijing in the north to Hangzhou in the south. Construction began during the Sui dynasty in 605 CE, making it roughly 1,400 years old. Today, this ancient waterway continues to serve its purpose, carrying cargo ships, passenger vessels, and playing a vital role in China's modern economy. Meanwhile, across the Pacific Ocean, the United States faces a mounting infrastructure crisis. Bridges built just 50 or 60 years ago are deteriorating at alarming rates, with thousands classified as structurally deficient. The contrast is striking and demands examination. How does an ancient waterway outlast modern American bridges, and what does this reveal about how civilizations approach infrastructure? The Grand Canal wasn't built quickly or haphazardly. Its construction spanned multiple dynasties and took centuries to complete in its current form. The Sui dynasty initiated the project with brutal efficiency, mobilizing millions of workers to dig the initial sections. Subsequent dynasties expanded, refined, and maintained the system. This wasn't merely about digging a ditch and calling it finished. The engineers of ancient China understood that a waterway of this magnitude required constant attention, sophisticated planning, and generational commitment. They built locks, dikes, and water management systems that demonstrated remarkable hydraulic engineering knowledge. The canal had to navigate varying elevations, manage seasonal flooding, and accommodate the enormous agricultural and commercial traffic that would define its purpose. What's crucial to understand is that the Grand Canal survived not because ancient Chinese materials were superior to modern American steel and concrete, but because of sustained institutional commitment to maintenance and adaptation. Throughout Chinese history, maintaining the canal was considered a fundamental responsibility of governance. Emperors understood that the canal was the empire's circulatory system, moving grain from the fertile south to feed the capital and armies in the north. When sections fell into disrepair, dynasties prioritized restoration. During periods of neglect, the canal's deterioration often coincided with broader political instability. The correlation wasn't coincidental. The health of the canal reflected the health of the state itself. The engineering philosophy behind the Grand Canal also differs fundamentally from much modern infrastructure. Ancient builders worked with natural geography rather than trying to dominate it entirely. The canal follows river valleys and existing waterways wherever possible, integrating with the landscape. This approach meant less dramatic intervention, but more sustainable long-term function. The materials used were primarily earth and stone, which, while requiring more maintenance than hoped, also allowed for incremental repairs using locally available resources. There was no expectation that once built, the canal would simply function indefinitely without human intervention. Compare this to the American approach to infrastructure. Particularly in the post-World War II boom, the interstate highway system, constructed primarily in the 50s and 60s, represented an enormous national investment and remarkable engineering achievement. Bridges, overpasses, and elevated highways were built with reinforced concrete and steel, materials that seemed permanent and modern. The prevailing assumption was that these structures would last indefinitely, or at least far longer than they actually have. Engineers designed for specific load capacities and lifespans, but the institutional commitment to maintenance didn't match the ambition of the initial construction. American bridges are failing, not because the engineers who designed them were incompetent, but because the political and economic systems that maintain them have broken down. Deferred maintenance has become standard practice. Infrastructure spending is politically unsexy compared to new construction or tax cuts. Politicians can cut ribbons at new bridge openings, but receive little credit for the unglamorous work of resurfacing, reinforcing, and preventing rust. The result is predictable. Structures designed for 50 or 75-year lifespans reach their limits while carrying far heavier traffic loads than originally anticipated. Modern vehicles are larger and more numerous than planners in the 1960s imagined. The funding mechanism matters enormously. China's authoritarian system allows for long-term infrastructure planning without the disruptions of electoral cycles. The government can mandate maintenance schedules and allocate resources without needing to justify every expenditure to voters worried about taxes. This isn't an endorsement of authoritarianism, but rather an acknowledgement that different political systems create different incentives for infrastructure investment. Democratic systems excel at many things, but long-term planning that requires sustained. Unglamorous spending often isn't among them. American infrastructure funding is fragmented across federal, state, and local levels, with constant political battles over who should pay for what. The federal gas tax, which funds much highway maintenance, hasn't been raised since 1993 and hasn't kept pace with inflation or the shift toward more fuel-efficient vehicles. States struggle with their own budget pressures. The result is a patchwork of underfunded maintenance programs where bridges literally have to reach crisis levels before receiving attention. Engineers conduct inspections and issue warnings, but warnings don't repair corroded steel or crumbling concrete. The materials science also plays a role. role, reinforced concrete seemed like a miracle material in the mid-20th century, and in many ways it is. But concrete has vulnerabilities that weren't fully appreciated during the infrastructure boom. Water seeps into tiny cracks, reaching the steel reinforcement bars inside. In cold climates, this water freezes, expands, and accelerates deterioration. Road salt, used to clear winter ice, is particularly corrosive. Over decades, the steel reinforcement rusts, expands, and causes concrete to crack and spall. Without regular maintenance to seal surfaces and prevent water infiltration, this process is inevitable. The Grand Canal doesn't face these particular challenges because its materials and structure are fundamentally different. There's also a cultural dimension worth considering. Traditional Chinese philosophy emphasized harmony with nature and thinking in generational timeframes. Building something meant accepting responsibility for its perpetual maintenance. The concept of built it and forget it would have seemed absurd. American culture, particularly in the 20th century, embraced technological optimism and the idea that newer was always better. This led to remarkable innovations, but also to a disposable mentality, where even massive infrastructure projects were treated as if they'd maintain themselves. The economic models driving development have shifted as well. Post-war America saw infrastructure as a public good, requiring public investment. The interstate system was justified partly on national defense grounds during the Cold War. That consensus has eroded. Today's political environment treats infrastructure spending as just another budget item competing with everything else, rather than as a foundational investment in economic productivity and public safety. China, meanwhile, has treated infrastructure as central to its economic development strategy, seeing it as both a driver of growth and a source of national pride. Climate change now adds another layer of complexity. American bridges were designed for historical weather patterns that no longer apply. Increased flooding, more severe storms, and greater temperature extremes all stress structures in ways their designers didn't anticipate. The Grand Canal, having survived 14 centuries of climate variation, has proven adaptable, but it too faces modern challenges from pollution, development, and changing water management needs. The path forward for American infrastructure requires acknowledging that maintenance isn't optional or deferrable. It requires funding mechanisms that survive political cycles and public recognition that infrastructure investment, while expensive, is far cheaper than dealing with catastrophic failures. It means treating bridges and roads not as finished products, but as living systems requiring constant care. The Grand Canal's lesson isn't that ancient engineering was superior, but that any infrastructure, regardless of how well built, requires sustained institutional commitment to maintenance and adaptation. Without that commitment, even the most impressive modern structures will crumble faster than ancient waterways built with nothing but earth, stone, and sustained human attention.